Hey folks, thanks for joining. We will be starting in a few minutes. Uh, if you're not speaking, please on mute. I'll be generally trying to keep most folks on mute as much as possible. If you want to speak, the best things you can do is one, either raise your hand and unmute yourself and you can speak. Hi Vidya, we can see you. I'm gonna also see if I can make you a co-host so that way you have access to do a bunch of other things.
Hi, everyone. This is Vidya.
Hey, Vidya.
Hey Vidya, we can hear you.
Oh.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, great. Thank you for joining. I'm looking forward to getting everyone started with their first Docker file today. I wanted to check if you can respond in the chat window. I did send out the meetup message only about 15 minutes ago. Did everyone on the call see that message with links to the Docker daemon installation? If you can respond in the chat window, that would be great. If not, that will probably be the first task that many of us will do. Okay, no worries. Looks like a lot of you, none of you have seen it. It was sent via an email on the meetup, but that is totally okay. I will start sharing my screen and I will put the link right away. All right. Okay. So again, thanks for joining. I'm Vidya Subramanian. I am the founder of MyTech Ladder and also founder of DevOpsly LLC. My background has been in backend platformization to support engineering teams, including tools for both testing and development environments and stress and performance test tools and all of that, which had to be built from scratch. Particularly, think Windows 2000, 20 years ago. My first job was all in the Windows networking tools team, and since then, I'm pretty excited at the evolution of the entire industry in how robust the tool sets have become and how easy it is for an engineer or a developer to actually pick up and spin up and scale up their capabilities. And containerization has really pushed that even further, and that's the topic for today. So I again want to thank everyone for joining and want to keep us on time. Before jumping into the details in terms of the agenda itself being all about containers, why containers, we are going to get into Docker, what is Docker, and we'll talk a little bit about Docker networking and do a hands-on exercise with a Docker file for a Node.js app. And if time permits, we will also get into database containers and a hands-on, at least maybe a demo of a Docker file for a SQL server with the data as well. So we'll see how we do on time. I also want to thank everyone for taking the pre-event survey. That really helped me in ensuring that I understand where people are at in terms of their exposure to Docker and the related technologies. Most common answer in the survey that was given, more than 90% of you, in fact, said you're looking for a sample exercise so that you can get your first exposure, if you will, to the containerization space, which is great. I want to share the data really quick. So about 95% have said you will be following along hands-on, which is also great. Over 70% have not written a Docker file before, so I am going to focus on that for the session today, is writing the first Docker file and building your first container. But having said that, I'm happy to do follow-up sessions for the other 30%, where we can get into specific application. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I'm here on the SDE Skills Slack channel as well. I'm happy to set up a follow-up or a separate session there. And like I said, majority have also indicated, over 85%, that you are looking for a sample hello world that is part of a suggested approach versus an application that you bring to the table. So that's kind of how the agenda today has been structured, based on that survey results. So any questions, real high level, before jumping in? I'm happy to keep looking out for questions in the chat window if there is anything pressing. Someone's asking, is Kubernetes OpenShift on the cards too? Not for today. Someone else is asking microservices on Docker. So microservices is absolutely a big part of how Docker is leveraged in the real world. Today's session is intended to be a hands-on, hello world containerization experience. Happy to, the very first in the series of talk that I did at SDE Skills, I had talked quite a bit about microservices. Last we had covered, last month, sorry, I had gone into Kubernetes as well. Some of those might be recorded sessions. We can catch up on Slack for links to that. also happy to dive deeper. Like I said, this is intended to be a series. So today we'll get into just, at the tip of the iceberg, if you will, in terms of a hello world for Docker, since you saw in the survey majority are looking for very first-time experience. Having said that, future sessions, the intention is, this is a 5-part series. The intention is to actually use a bigger application with more than 2 microservices at least, and a full stack, in fact, with a DB, and we will cover that in a future session. But the actual core aspect of it, the hello world is a microservice. So it really is not something that you're not going to be able to use or utilize. It is a Node.js microservice, and you can see that in a minute as we get into the details. Do we have more Kubernetes session in future? Absolutely, that's my intent. I'm planning to do it as a series once a month. Hopefully is how I'm locking it down on my calendar. Maybe it'll be once in 6 weeks if I'm not able to get to it every 4 weeks. What environment will we be using to set up Docker? So you will be installing the Docker daemon in your own machine. I will give you the links now to either Mac or Ubuntu. Those two are fairly straightforward in terms of getting started with Docker. If you have the latest Windows 2016, that does have Docker on by default, so that would be fairly straightforward. The others, I believe, Windows 2019, gosh, it's 2020 now. Windows 2019, you should be able to do on Windows also fairly easily. But the other versions of Windows may not be as straightforward. Okay, other questions? Great. Okay, so let's jump in. Want to really start at the basics of what is a container and what is Docker. So Docker is a specific example of a container technology and is not the only one. Containers is a generic technology, and here is a definition that you can all read. It is a form of operating system virtualization, and a single container might be used to run anything from a small microservice or software process to a larger application. Inside a container are all the necessary executables, binary code, libraries, and config files. Now, this is really important that inside the container, everything that your application or microservice will need to run end-to-end is going to be contained in it, hence the word container. So what happens is from that, and you will see it in your hands-on experience today, that container then once built, it has an image captured, and from that point on, you can just continue using that image. And to build that image, there are a variety of possibilities. We will be using Docker as a platform and Docker file specifically in order to facilitate. His question is, container considered to be an instance of image? So the way to think about it is an instance of an image is a container, but it is kind of a tricky use of the word container. So there is the containerization technology using which you will create images. And then from that images, each instance you spin up is, the container is therefore the copy of the image. So every container is a copy of, you're right, is an instance of the image. It's a copy of that image. But in order to build that original image, you are using a containerization technology. But once the image is built, every instance of it, every replica would be called a container. And a container is created. So to build this image, you will later on be using the Docker file, but the Docker platform has provided a variety of rich sets of tools, including the basic ability to build. So you would do Docker build and just give the image name, and there are a variety of tags. The Docker build -t image name is the fundamental basic one once you have created the image. Which part of OS is included in container image? I thought containers share the kernel of host. Yeah, so the kernel is absolutely shared. So it's think about it as, you will again see this in the Node.js example. Everything that you need to run that Node.js, all the libraries and all the dependencies, that is captured. The OS libraries for Node.js will be in the container, but the kernel of the OS is outside of that container. So for example, if you are, let's say, doing a Java application, a Java microservice, the JVM will be in the container. So you are not, you don't have to install that individually, unlike, let's say, VM, right? In a virtual machine, you would be installing all that, but you do not have to install that. A container is a standard unit of software. Yeah, sure. Someone has provided a definition. Thanks. Are there any use cases where VMs would be a better option to use? We'll talk about that. That's a very broad question. Absolutely, there are clearly some use cases where there isn't a need to move or migrate from a VM to container just for the sake of it. But that's not a general agenda for this topic, for this meetup today, since that's a pretty vast conversation of its own. Another question, Docker engine top of OS. Yes, it is on top of your operating system. Can we take up Q&A after we are done with the slide deck? Someone is asking. Yes, that is also a fair point. I want to make sure that people understand what's on the agenda for today. So I want to take some questions so that we can weed out, people's expectations one way or the other for the remainder of the hour. But yeah, thanks, Sai Kiran. That is a good point. We don't need to take too many questions up front. So today's session is intended to be a hands-on, build your first Docker file type exercise. It is not, so that you are coming here with the goal of or wanting to explore Docker specifically. If you don't understand containers in general, by doing this, you will get some flavor of understanding for sure. But this is not a generic session. The previous two were covering a lot of generic aspects of containers. So please do watch those videos, and I'm happy to take follow-up questions offline as well. So the core platform being used today is Docker for the containerization. So for example, if you want to create the container from the image, right? Then Docker is providing you with the create command as part of the platform. So a container is created from an image. This was a question that people had, and consists of your running application and the environment required for the application alone, not the rest of the operating system. For something like that, Docker has beautifully created just Docker create as the command. So all you have to do is Docker create and provide the image name, and then that would create the container. If you want to see the list of containers, you would just do Docker PS. Docker images will give you the list of images. So these are the types of commands that we will be running today. So please have your laptop ready. Namespacing and control groups that were provided by Linux kernel were the basics on which Docker. Okay. What would be the environment used for this session? For today's session, it is your local environment, whatever you want to set it up on. I am providing the links for Ubuntu and Mac right away. You can go in there and look for the Windows version as well. Yeah, if you have questions about the setup, which image we need to take, yeah, we will be covering that today. So today, I will be providing you with what is the basic example hello world, as well as I am providing you with how to create your first Docker file. Only thing you need is install your Docker daemon. So we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So before getting into Docker generically, it's fairly important to understand Docker at a networking layer. The container has its own set of IP addresses, which is different from your host IP address. And this is pretty important because you're exposing all the traffic to the container can be mapped to a host port, and that's something that Docker again provides as a way to do using commands like Docker create. Host port can be mapped, but that's an important differentiation. And again, in our example, you will see you will be mapping. If your application listens on port 8080, that's a container port. When you create the container map 8080 to an available host port, other services or users can access your application. And again, in the example today, we will have a specific port number that you'll be assigning your application to, and that'll be different from the host port. And then, of course, these are just some sample examples of commands. You can go to Docker and reference a lot more. The important thing to keep in mind is that with the Docker networking capabilities, the IP address mapping being differentiated from the host IP address is important, because that's how you're allowing the capability of Docker to expose the container through its own port. I will take questions per slide. So please keep your questions relevant to the slide. And if you have generic questions, save that for later. Any questions on this slide about Docker networking? Docker use in networking like VNet and subnet, like IP address range. No, that is not the layer at which the Docker networking is purely at the Docker at the port level, and Docker is using a very different mechanism of bridging the port, and that's about the level of networking. So you don't think at the subnet VNet level of networking. That is well below the layer at which Docker is being used for your application. If you want to differentiate the two, I believe we access the Docker process using the IP address host. Yeah, that's right. That's the redirection. If you see, I'm talking about in this first bullet. How do containers talk to each other? That's a very different topic altogether. We can definitely get into it. We covered some of it last week, last session in the container orchestration. There will be follow-ups on container orchestration, but it's not on today's agenda. So will this make Docker between IIS, Apache, and application? I don't understand fully, but if I understand the question, you're asking IIS and application, is Docker sitting in between those two layers? The answer is no. So port would be application-wise like MongoDB port. That's right. MongoDB, Jenkins has a port. Similarly, you are exposing your application at a given port. Is the session being recorded? I am not recording. Good reminder. Let me start the recording.
The session is being live streamed on YouTube and it's automatically recorded as well.
Okay, thanks, Vivek. So IIS Apache listens on port 80. Yeah, so that's the specific port mapping discussion that we just had. You will see that in this example as well, how the mapping will work for the given application port onto Docker. Does Docker support HTTP protocol or HTTPS also? Yeah, you can do both. Other questions on this on the previous slide? If not, moving on. Does Docker and host share the same network stack? Yes. When you say network stack, you mean do they access the same network? The general answer is yes, but because the kernel is shared, if you think in terms of the networking stack, if there is a lot of interest in networking aspect of it, again, absolutely very deep, wide topic, something that's very dear to my heart, given, like I said, my very first job was all in Windows networking. Not on the agenda to go deeper there for today, though. If people are interested, I'm happy to put that as another topic for a future date. Other questions specifically to Docker in terms of your understanding of how this is? Some of it might get clarified as we get into this slide. I am going to put the link here in the chat window. So if people are able to install right away, that'd be great. Or you can just do it without even the link by just going to docker.com. This is the link if you're on Mac. There is also an Ubuntu. So how about
we lost the screen share. Did you?
Yeah, I had to stop sharing because I want to, otherwise during share, I was not able to paste the link.
Got it.
Oh, please share the link. Sorry, looks like for some reason it went.
It might have gone a private message to somebody else.
Yeah, can I please request that people not send me private message on chat right now, because I think inadvertently I'm responding to the last one and that's going private. Okay.
Yeah, so I can just post it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's take a few minutes to install. And I'll go back to sharing. I had to stop sharing because and I'm going to also cut and paste the hello world that we are using today. So give me just a second. It's also in the chat window now. So I'm going to just give everyone a few minutes to install. And please also feel free to copy paste that hello world that I just put in the chat window. Yes, if you already have a Docker installed, by all means, please use that. There is no need to reinstall. Is this version of Docker Image Express? No. This is for the Hello World Node.js. So it's 2:01 right now. How about at 2:05? I do a quick check-in on how everyone's doing with respect to their installation. Yeah, I'll go back to sharing my screen. If you can also just, I've copy pasted the Hello World app also here that we are using today. And here are the installation links. Hope the installation is going okay for everyone. We'll just give ourselves a couple more minutes. Yeah, thanks, Anirudh, for the Docker for Windows link. Okay. So for those of you who are able to follow along, please create a file. What we are doing here is creating a package.json for what is in this in the chat window for you. I have put the name of the the content of the file there. Feel free to just grab that. You also see it in the text here in the slide here. Should be able to so if you want to create a new folder, mkdir hello, for this example, that would be great. I'm going to do that again. Everyone who has it installed, ready to move along, I'm assuming. Does anybody have any concerns if we kept moving along? Please do chime in if you have any concerns or questions. These commands themselves are pretty simple, so we are creating now in this folder, let's create this new file, package.json. So I'm just using the editor, vi, and copy paste this. And save. Oops, I did not give the file name. Package.json.
Are you trying to share your console, Vidya?
Yeah, are you not seeing it?
No, we're just seeing the slides. I think you have the Chrome shared, not the desktop.
Oh, thank you for letting me know. Let me fix that. How about now? I think I'm sharing my desktop now. Do you see it?
Yes.
Yes,
Do
we
you
do.
see the terminal?
Not yet. Yes, now it is. I can see a terminal now.
Okay, thanks. Can you open the slides? Okay. I think those were just saying yes. Okay. So yeah, is everyone has everyone created the package.json?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, let me follow along. So now what we have here is a basic Hello World service with its corresponding JSON file. We need to now create the server for the same Hello World. So if you want to do hello, create a server.js, here is the content that we are using for that. I'll paste this also in the chat window. Do we install Ubuntu as well? No, you can. You just need to do one or the other. Once you have, yeah, thanks for responding. Once you have installed Docker, depending on your operating system, pick which one you is the right one for you to install, and then you can check the Docker version like suggested, and create the package.json, and then create the server.js. Do you have a GitHub link to the Hello World? We can use that for getting the files. Oh, that's a good idea. Let me see for this Hello World if I have the GitHub link. I don't believe I have I don't have a direct one, but that's a good idea. I think next time what I'll do is just got me thinking that next time I'll just put it so that it's easier for people to grab it from GitHub as well. The next question is, always we write Docker file and upload in Git? Yes. You will. In order to containerize anything, and we are not there yet, in terms of writing the Docker file, you absolutely will write the Docker file, and that will always be part of your path for any application. Copy paste doesn't include a carriage return, someone is saying. Yeah. No, that's a pain. Yeah, sorry about that. Zoom is definitely not intended to be dev friendly, it looks like. Okay, I'll give people a minute or two to get through this, especially if you're having to deal with carriage return issues and so on. I can also email this to everyone in the meetup. Let me do that right away, both the snippets, so that it's less painful from a copy-paste point of view. Oh, or Slack would be good too. Yeah, Slack is a good idea. Let me just bring up my Slack. Give me just a second. Okay. Paste bin. That's a good option, huh? I just put that in general. I don't know if there is another channel that I should have used, but
In general, it's fine. Let's keep using it.
okay. And here is the server.js. Okay, I hope people are able to get to the files now from Slack. Once you have done those two, in the same directory, we'll be creating a Docker file. So I'm going to give people another minute or two before we start doing the Docker file. Okay. Are we good here? Okay. So now create a file called Docker file in the same hello directory. There is the sample. I just pasted it in the Slack channel again. The key aspect to containerization, as we have been talking about, comes from how this Docker file is built. The critical element starts with where are you building your image from, right? In this case, there'll always be a base image that you're leveraging to build off of your own application. In this case, it is from Node 10. So you just have that specified, and then you create your application directory. So I have put the comment here. So this work dir is specifying what is the directory. And then once you're able to set up your Docker file with these specific commands, you have to copy all the dependencies, install, copy all the dependencies, run the installation after the dependencies are copied. And those are the steps that the Docker file specifically goes through one after the other. I'll let everyone complete the Docker file as well. Lots of questions.
Copy dot dot. What does it do? It doesn't copy anything. Actually, the copy dot dot after bundle app source.
Yeah, so that is specifically taking, when you say dot dot, it is coming from your local, right? So it's just taking local dot where it is in the hello folder to the container.
Okay.
So it means that it's everything, like under the dot is the current directory, right? It copies everything under that.
That's
into
right.
the Docker.
So,
Okay.
yeah, so we have created a new directory with this. So that's where it is coming from.
Okay.
Okay. And what about the from part? Can you repeat it, like why we need the from part?
Oh, so the basic power, if you will, of containers is that the base image is always something that is out there. You can leverage. So in our application, right, we are using Node. We don't have to now, right now, none of you, unless you were already developing some other application on Node, you may not have Node at all in your respective laptops. But that base image of Node is coming from somewhere. So you all of a sudden, just by a snippet that I just gave you, you are building a hello world of Node in your own laptop, even though you have nothing installed for Node.js.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Docker image, we are going to from the Docker side, from the base image. And after that, we are going to modify that as per our requirement. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So you always get a base image, and the beauty of now how this community is thriving is that people share these base images. You can just go to Docker and grab base image of practically everything now. You don't need to have anything on your laptop anymore, which makes it so much easier. And then from then on, you can modify and build on top of it, like you just said.
Okay, thanks.
A Docker file should not have an extension. Is that a question? Yeah, a Docker file is just a Docker file. The default extension is .txt, so Docker file will be, okay, someone is answering that. Thank you. I am missing. Thanks for answering those questions. Is everyone kind of with me so far? Yes, you can use Notepad. Someone's asking. You do have to watch out for the extensions for sure. If you use something like VI, that is another option. Of course, you can you do all of this in your IDE. And normally, I do use IDE. I didn't want to get people to then worry about which IDE to use if you don't by default use one every day. Yeah, Sublime is always a good one, as is IntelliJ, which is my go-to. I use IntelliJ if that question was directed at me, but someone else is saying VS Code, so it is. I think this can quickly become a religious war every time it has. So I'm going to stay away from that topic. Okay, so assuming everyone is following along so far, what we have done is, you have copies of some basic Hello World, both the packaging JSON as well as the server JS. You also have now written the Docker file, which we are going to be using today. Any questions so far that are not yet answered or covered in the chat window? Okay. I'm going to check one more time for questions to make sure. What is cmd node server.js? This last command, node server.js, once you have exposed the container, you want to start the container command. So that is what it is doing. So every line here is serving a purpose, so which was something I'm planning to cover next. So we only talked about the three top lines so far, right? From base image, where is the installation dependencies? It's running the npm install. We have already created the package.json. And then you're bundling by doing so, by running that. And then it is copying all of that and exposing port 8080, followed by it starting a command in the container. That is what starts the microservice by default for you. We just built the microservice, and that needs to be started, which is what that last command does once the port is exposed. So if you see the sequencing of what the Docker file contains, it basically did everything from the time you have finished your application code. From that point on, the Docker platform can basically take care of everything that you need in terms of both building and deployment in a very simplistic scenario, because that's what the Hello World is. Of course, in a sophisticated application with multiple microservices, it's not as simple. We'll cover something like that at a later date, but from a Hello World point of view, this absolutely is giving you the end-to-end all the way from building to deployment. Okay. Other questions or anything before we move on and try this? Working directory is a path on Docker host, I believe. What does expose do? So what is, so you will see this later in terms of how the actual port number is getting associated, but it is exposing the container port. So if you remember, we had talked about Docker container networking. It's exposing that port to other containers that are available in the same setup. So it's exposing, if you have multiple containers running, it's exposing to that. Other questions?
I can't access it from the browser.
Yet?
Is it yet? Okay. So we need to kind of assign some port to the container?
That's right. You have to now find where it is running. So You're a step ahead of me. Let's go to the next set of steps. Make sure you are in the hello folder, and you want to first build it. So we have not yet built. All the commands are there in the Docker file. So you want to run this command, docker build -t hello image dot. I am pasting this in the chat window now. I'll put it in Slack just to be sure. It's in general. Once you do that, if you do Docker images, you will be able to see your Docker images. I'm just going to okay.
Is there a way to mention the mapping in the Docker file?
Mention the mapping of the ports in the Docker file? I don't believe so.
So when you run, you have to explicitly say that this port is going to be for this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is everyone with me so far in terms of Docker build? Once you have done that, if you do Docker images, you'll be able to, mine has a few more than today's, but you should be able to see a list of Docker images. So I have a hello image. Someone's getting an error, npm error, JSON parse. If you are getting a complete log of this can be found. Yeah. So are you, can you make sure that you have looked at package.json? I mean, you have grabbed package.json accurately? If you can go back to package.json, maybe there is some cut and paste error.
I'll try again. I just recopied and pasted from your.
No, I think the quotes are having an issue. You see the quotes, they look differently when you cut and copy paste it.
Okay. I'll check that.
You are supposed to remove them and put the right quotes. That's why you're getting the error.
Okay, thank you.
I see. Thank you for that. Here are all the commands that we are running here. I'm just going to put this in Slack. So first, let's look at the list of Docker images. It should be created now. And then if you do Docker run, you're basically now running the hello image.
So we are redirecting from the container port to the host port, right? 3005 is the container port.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, 3005 is the host port, right?
Host port, okay. To the container port, okay.
Yeah. So see, that's why if I try to do it again, I get this error message saying port is already allocated. Because I already have this running if I try to run it again on the same port. That's mapping the container port 8080 to host port. And we had specified that container port 8080 in the Docker file. Now, if you do Docker PS, it gives you this hello image. You need the dot at the end. Do you have it? Okay, someone's helping troubleshoot. Thank you for that. And once you are able to see your Docker image, you can either go view it directly in the browser. Now you can go to localhost 3005 on your browser, or you can do that in the command line by doing the curl. So I'm going to go back to this. So I see hello world in this localhost. Going to do it in another window just to be sure it is not my cached version. Yep. Okay. So what you can also do in addition is if you run the curl command, that just shows you command line, the details of that there you go. If you are able to pull up the hello world in your browser, I'd love to hear you say so in either the chat window or by unmuting. Okay. So we do have quite a few people who are able to, people are saying I'm having an issue. I'm not able to see the details in Docker PS, though my Docker run executed successfully. What are you seeing in?
So when I do a Docker run, I'm able to see the particular ID that it generated for that process. But when I do a Docker PS, there seems to be nothing running under container, image, or command. I don't see anything.
Can you do Docker PS space -A?
Oh yeah, I do see that. Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah.
So that is showing you the stopped container.
Yeah, it says exited.
Yeah. So probably when the container was built, something went wrong and it ended up bailing out.
Okay.
So you don't have the container running anymore, it appears. So you obviously are not able to, okay. Should probably, of course, give it another try. I'm curious to see how that goes. Sometimes, it might just be even a network problem. Just redo the image and see what happens.
Okay, sure.
Anyone else? If you type, yeah, okay, thanks for troubleshooting. Anyone else having issues? Chirayu saying it works, great. While Docker build, there was a warning, you need to commit this file. Is this related in any way? No, that's just that, we're just doing it in an ad hoc basis. And we're not, following the best practice of committing the file. That's no big deal. So it looks like it did work for some of you. Some of you are trying another port. Yeah, try another port. I'm getting JSON parse error. Yeah, if you're getting JSON parse error, please go back to the package.json file I copy pasted. I'm sure it's very much a copy paste / syntax problem because of maybe just going through editors between Slack and my slide deck. Can someone paste their working package.json here? Yeah, that would be helpful if we just do it as a code block. That's a good idea. Some of you who did say it is working. If you're able to do that, I'll also do the same. It's a good suggestion to put it as a code block.
What channel in Slack are you using?
General.
In general, okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Siddesh.
So is there any way we can look at the logs if it doesn't start? So what is the command to?
Yeah, so that would be Docker logs. I'll put that in the chat window also.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Also, guys, if you use the Docker UI, you can click on the container and you can see the logs real time.
Oh, okay. So how do we get the Docker UI? Is that?
Do you have what, Mac or Windows?
It's a Mac.
It's a Mac. Well, I guess on the top you have the icon of Docker.
Yeah, I do have.
And you can, I mean, right now I'm on my Windows, but probably you have something like dashboard if you click on it.
Dashboard, yeah, I do see that, yeah.
And then you have all the containers there, so just click on the container that's running.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good point. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
I'm not a UI person at all, so that's always a nice place to look. Okay, great. It looks like some of you are just running into syntax issues, so that's definitely coming from. So this time you're saying looks like there is an error in server.js. Again, if we can put that as a code snippet, the server.js as well, that would be helpful.
Okay. I'm trying to install, so I have created packet.json, I have server.js. What after that? I've tried npm install, but it gives me a JSON parsing error.
No, you don't need to do npm install because that's part of the Docker file. So
okay.
Please, after that, you need to create a Docker file. So just to recap, you first, I'll go back to sharing my screen.
Okay, awesome.
So we want to first make sure that you have the package.json created. Then you want to make an order doesn't matter. You want to also make sure that the server.js is created.
Yeah, I have both of that in a hello folder.
Okay, now you want to create the Docker file. Again, the copy paste of that is there in the Slack general channel.
Mm-hmm. And
so
this should be the same in hello folder.
Yeah, in the same hello folder, create a Docker file. It should be called Docker file without any extension. And inside that, there is a run npm install that happens. So if you cut and paste, that will just automatically be part of it. And then,
okay, after that.
Yeah, once you have your Docker file, here are the list of commands. It's in the window as well. But basically what you're doing is the Docker build -t hello image dot.
Okay, let me run
These are the set of commands. I will leave this here for a bit so people can try
Sure,
to.
thank you.
Even if you missed it in the chat window, you can just try to replicate what's on this window.
So Docker build -t hello image.
Yeah,
gives me
and
an
then
error.
a dot.
Then a
Did
dot.
you? Yeah, hello image space dot. The code for server.js is in the Slack window. Sukhen Tiwari is asking that question. So please look in the general channel of Slack for that. Unable to prepare context, unable to evaluate symlinks in Docker file path. The system cannot find the file specified. You tried a different host port. The Docker file, you have it in the system cannot find the file. You get that the system cannot find the file. Do you have the other files there? Do you have the Node.js and server.js and the package.json in that same folder, Sushma? Unable to have those files in the folder, says Sushma. Okay. Yeah, I would look at the. Yeah.
I think you can run Docker images and then see the ID, and you can copy the ID and run with the ID, I guess.
Yep. Okay, if you're getting connection refused on the local host port 3005, that probably means that port is not getting opened up. You could try another port number when you're doing your Docker run. So make sure that you did the Docker run before that, Spurti. That's the first question I have. Did you do this command? Docker run -p 3005:8080, because that's how, okay. So if you did that, and then if you've done that mapping and you did Docker PS, okay.
So I'm using the.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm using the server.js. I pasted on the Slack channel also, but I keep getting the same error. So I copied from the Slack channel, and then it keeps erroring out on the first element, which is the name. So it says unexpected token, which is a colon.
Hey,
maybe
that's the package.json. That's not server.js. This file is package.json.
Oh, this is the package.json. Okay.
Correct. Server.js looks different.
Okay.
Sorry, where are you? Thank you for answering that.
If you scroll a little up further before, I think SKT had actually posted server.js. It starts with const express equals requires express. That is the server.js.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think most of you who have been able to complete can see that this kind of gives you the end-to-end picture of what you have done is successfully deployed your Docker image. Some of you are probably having some syntax issues, those kind of things. This will now become homework. Really glad to see many of you were able to get this running. I will be available on Slack later on if you have questions. Now I want to move on, unless you have any questions about this general Dockerization of an application. I want to move on and also spend some time to talk about database containers. This is important because we all know in real world, a full stack for any application involves both sides of it, right? You need the application as well as the database. For the example today, we may not be able to go and cover this hands-on because I had the time till 3 o'clock for the session today, but I definitely plan to cover this. I'll show this as a demo, and then we can take questions from that point on. How many of you are familiar with any form of container that is outside of application? Probably not very much is my guess, because Docker images that are available somehow often tends to be associated with application layer. I want to therefore mention the database aspect. The Docker images for MySQL, MongoDB, and all database services are out there as well. But a key point there as an issue or a gotcha tends to be that whenever there is a database component, you of course need the data associated with it as well. Having just the database doesn't allow you to do whether you're using this for testing purposes or pushing it to production. The data backing up and making that to be available as part of an image is a unique solution that in this example today I'm showing is being provided by Windocs. It's a port of Docker to Windows and focused on delivering SQL Server. And what I find particularly interesting is that SQL Server, again, is not often brought along with the modernization of a lot of the stack. So I come across this as a common problem, if you will, when companies are trying to modernize and when organizations are trying to transform. It delays their changes significantly, and it slows them down because now they're also looking at, oh, do we have to now switch from SQL Server and pick something else? And the answer is no, if you are able to use a solution like Windocs, and then you can also get terabyte data clones delivered very, very fast. So that's like a large volume of data. So not only can you get the database, but if you can also get the data with it, you can instantly spin up environments. Particularly, this is a huge win when large organizations are looking at replicating their test environments very quickly. Any questions about that slide and about database containers in general before I move on? Database container is secure. Yes, it is secure. How much size, DB size, can take on containers? Like I said, the data itself can be up to 64 terabyte in this particular solution. If you go with, And that's a pretty large volume. So Windocs, you can do 64 terabytes.
So are we making any replica also in the container? Let's say one container got failed. So are we making parallel replica also?
Sorry, can you repeat that question? There is a little bit of noise.
Are we making replica also? Let's say one container got failed, so our application will be available for the second container. I mean,
so that will be cloned. Don't think of it as replicas. What is happening is cloning of the container. So that is like I would say a container terminology / approach with containers is that what you're getting is clones.
Okay. And do we need to take any backups also here, like database backup if something goes wrong? No.
Yes. So you should definitely continue best practices like backing up. What the cloning based on Windows is, what Windocs would provide would be cloning based on differencing disks. So it's differencing, it's doing a Windows differencing of disks.
I had a quick question. So when you run basically your containers with different processes in them, right? So is it recommended that your database runs as a separate container and then your application runs as a separate container, or do you recommend running both of them as one process within a container?
Should be different.
Definitely separate. I'm assuming this is an application of some reasonable scale. If you're just doing it at home, something, it's just like, that's different. You don't need to separate it, but otherwise definitely separate.
Sure. And even if you're creating a cluster, you would recommend basically spawning as different process, right? Each one of those SQL instances or MongoDB instances.
Yes.
Okay.
Vidya, just a question. Yeah. I have a question. Isn't it better to have, for example, the database to be kind of like not Dockerized on your end, but to use some existing services out there? Because of course, data is important. So if, for example, you delete the container by accident, then the data is gone.
When you delete the container, the data is not gone. What you have is, that would be just a clone, right? Yes, the containers can get dropped. That is a concern. The clone will exist separately from the container.
Where does it exist?
That will exist just like what we saw in case of the Docker file, right? In the file system, every single image will be there. Similarly, in the case of the database, the differencing disks will be there in the file system.
Okay.
So database or container also having some data recovery. Let's say something, we are having our database container in one data center and whole one data center got down. So do we have something in different data center?
Now that is a very different question. High availability, right? What you are asking about is high availability. Absolutely, you can. And in fact, I recommend using solutions like this for HA. And disaster recovery, so you can keep multiple data centers fairly in sync at quick sort of succession. That would be a very good use case to solve using technologies like this.
Okay. And a specific SQL version or MongoDB version or SQL version are supported in the container, yeah, we can take any version.
This one, the Windocs example is SQL Server. MongoDB is a separate one, but it is available for a variety of databases, including SQL Server.
No, I'm talking about the specific version. So that means our servers, all versions of, let's say, SQL having many versions, 2016, 2012, 2008, 2019. So those container can we make with any version?
Yes.
Yeah,
It,
with the column.
2008, For SQL Server, it is 2008 onwards. It can do any version, and similarly for Mongo as well. There are different versions that the container would support.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So if people are wanting to follow along for this section of it, you would have to install Windocs. It will have to be a download from windocs.com. And then similar to what we did for the application, we will then be building a Docker file. And I'm going to copy paste that Docker file for you. Although the Windocs, so if you do want to do that, take a look at that. I'm going to, in the interest of time, probably just make this a demo. So you would build a Docker file similar to what was done for the other example, and then do a Docker build and Docker run. So I'm going to, like I said, in the interest of time, just make this a demo instead of, since we are already at 3. So I'm going to log into a pre-existing Windocs that I have. I'll just share the screen from this point on. I do have backups for some databases that is already available. So in this case, if you go in here, look at the Docker file. So the Docker file already exists. I'm going to go look at a specific sample. So let's say, so there is a test. We're going to maybe use test fast clone from differential. We'll probably use that today. So that exists. And I want to make sure that that has a Docker file, because yes, it does. That's what we want to be using. And then I want to also go see that I have DB backups. In this case, there are a bunch of backups. Well, we'll probably use the customer data. Okay, I need to remember this. Customer data full. That's the one that we want to be using. And then...
So are you trying to take the backup and then trying to restore it?
Yeah, so the idea is that it is creating an image of that data that you can then use multiple times. So think of it as the use case would be in production, there is large volumes of data and the staging environment always has been using some kind of a test data instead of real-time data. But if you want to get real-time data, this would be a way to do it. So it's good for delivering staging and testing environments where one-time image build, you can keep it current with what is in production.
Okay, so let's say you took the backup from the production and you are taking that backup and making to the staging environment for the testing purpose, something like that? Yeah,
exactly. And that's what a lot of the large corporations have difficulty with, especially with the big push now to AI. Having real data has become quite critical for teams to be successful at what they do. So this is one way of expediting it, because containers make it super. So this is to really demonstrate the power of containers, right? You can just instantly make it available.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so this is where the backup is, and then so once you have the backup, we also have the Docker file. I'm just going to see if I have the Docker image. So I had done an example image a couple of hours ago, just in case we ran into this. And all I was doing in that case was, once this Docker file was set up, exactly similar to what you did with the application, Docker build and then a Docker run, and that would deliver the SQL Server container with the clone of the customer base. And that's what this example image now has. It is a clone of this entire customer data, the full customer data, using the container technology.
So in the container, how application container is connecting to the database connect, and where is the connection string? I mean.
Yeah, so that is in today's session, we didn't cover sort of the connectivity, and this wasn't about a full stack application itself. That's something that you would do in your environment Docker files, how you would set up. There will be, the way your application is configured, it would be the same way. This was just to show a sample that you can also do it for database, but it is not for the same application.
Okay.
I had a quick question. So when you're installing like MySQL and then running it on a container, right? Containers are all ephemeral storage, right? So for instance, like when you have these redo logs and commit logs, so do we create a shared mount and then have those files written into the shared mount? Because if the container is lost, so then we get it from the shared mount. Is that the kind of like how we do it, or?
Yeah, so there are, now, you're asking real problems, many of which is actually solved by container orchestrators. So this is a good segue into the other aspects of what this series will cover. Not intended to go into sort of, production use of these at all today, since it was like, hey, this is how you get started. But container orchestrators provide many of those functionality, in fact, out of the box. And we can cover that when we look at Kubernetes in one of the subsequent sessions.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Other questions? Anything that people have in terms of overall from the session today? And anyone who was not able to complete the session, I saw Vivek has offered to help. Thank you, Vivek. I'm happy to answer questions and help you through it on Slack. Right now, I may not be able to stay for very much longer for this session. I had planned 1:30 to 3, but I'll be available on Slack, anytime. So just feel free to ping.
Yeah, I had one last question. So in the future series, so will you be covering like deploying these Docker containers on AWS and how we can leverage that?
Yeah, so I had planned on GCP, but now that you bring up, just like what I did today, what I'll probably do is have a quick pre-session survey, survey. So I'm picking the cloud that is that's a favorite in the amongst the audience. GCP or AWS would be what I'm comfortable with, but if majority come back and say Azure, that's not going to be a problem either. So I'll definitely take input before picking one versus the other.
Sure, thank you.
And if there is any plan, we are getting intimation from that like Slack channel, right?
Yes, I'll do that. I'll use Slack channel as well as I did reply using the Meetup. Let me talk to Vivek and see what's the best way to keep in touch. Maybe Meetup is not the best way to post all the updates. I might do that on Slack.
Sure. So when we are talking about the container app, so when we are putting the connection string, so how we are securing our user ID password in the container world? Then let's say in Azure, we are putting in the Azure Key Vault and we are accessing from the Azure Key Vault. So how in the container world we are securing our user ID password?
Yeah, so secrets management is a big part of it. Again, some of it, when you get into orchestration, that will be features provided there by the container orchestrator.
So that means you are talking about Kubernetes?
Yeah. So we'll cover secrets will be a big topic for sure in what we cover in Kubernetes, since that's an important use case.
Okay. I got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks everyone for participating. The last question I see is yes, I will share the PowerPoint also in the Slack channel.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.